People think the scariest part of my job was the screaming. It wasn't. I could handle screaming. Screaming meant someone was still alive enough to be afraid, and that gave me something to do. I had a script for panic. I had a tone of voice that slowed people down. I had steps. The scariest part was always the silence, after the system agreed with something that couldn't be true. Let me back up. For 6 years, I worked overnight dispatch at the Emergency Communications Center for a small county out in the middle of nowhere. I won't say which one. It doesn't matter, and honestly, it might matter too much. It was the kind of county where you could drive 40 minutes between gas stations, 2 little towns, a scatter of farms, a state highway cutting through the middle, and a whole lot of dark. Population thin enough that on a good night, the whole county might generate a dozen calls. The night shift was me, sometimes one other dispatcher, and the radio. That was it. A low room with the blinds always down because there was nothing to see outside anyway. 4 monitors glowing blue in front of me, the CAD system on 2 of them, mapping on the 3rd, phones and radio status on the 4th, a coffee maker that never got cleaned properly, a clock on the wall that was always about 90 seconds off from the clock in the system, and I could never decide which one to trust. I want to explain something about this work before I tell you what happened, because if you don't understand how much of it runs on trust, none of the rest of it will land right. Dispatch is a machine made out of belief. When a call comes in, the system pulls a location. You believe it. When someone gives you an address, you type it, and the map confirms it, and you believe it. When a patrol unit keys up and says they're 10-8, in service, at such and such a road, you believe them, and you mark it. Everything is a chain of small trusts. The caller trusts you. You trust the address. The address trusts the map. The map trusts the county records. The unit trusts the dispatch. And the whole thing holds together, because nobody in that chain has any reason to lie, and the system has no imagination. It only knows what's real. It only knows what exists. That's what made me good at the job, I think. I'm not a nervous person. I don't spook. I've talked a man through doing CPR on his wife while she died anyway. I've stayed on the line with a teenager hiding in a closet while I could hear his father breaking down the door. Real things. Terrible, real things. I never once doubted the system during any of that, because the system was the only steady thing in the room. The addresses were right. The units went where I sent them. Procedure kept the panic organized. That's what procedure is for. So understand that when I tell you the system started confirming things that weren't real, I don't mean it glitched. A glitch would have comforted me. A glitch I could fix. I mean it agreed. The first one came in on a Tuesday in October, a little after 2 in the morning. I remember it was a slow night. I'd already handled a deer collision out on the state highway around 11, an old man with chest pains at midnight that turned out to be indigestion, and a noise complaint that resolved itself before the unit even arrived. By 2, I was doing what you do on a slow shift, which is nothing, in a state of low-grade readiness, listening to the radio hiss. The 911 line rang. Landline, not cell, which already tells you something out there, because most people call from cells. The screen populated the way it's supposed to, caller information filling in the fields. I answered the way I always did. 911, what's the location of your emergency? There was a woman on the line. Calm, not the flat calm of shock, but the ordinary calm of someone who has already decided you're going to help them. There's a fire, she said. The barn's caught, and it's spreading to the house. Okay, ma'am. Stay with me. What's the address? 41 County Road 9, out past the Halver's place. I typed it. And here's the thing. The address didn't come up. County Road 9 existed, sure, but it dead-ended at a gravel turnaround at number 29. There was no 41. There was no house past the Halver's place, because the Halver's place was the last property on that road. I knew this, not from the map, from driving it. I'd lived in that county most of my life. I didn't say any of that to her, because you never tell a caller they're wrong. You verify. Ma'am, I want to make sure I get you the right help. Can you see any landmarks? Any cross street? A mailbox number? Anything nearby? It's the white farmhouse, she said. The one with the blue silo. You've been out here before. I hadn't. There's no blue silo in that county. I would have remembered a blue silo. But she said it like it was obvious. Like she was reminding me, not informing me. I told her I was getting help on the way, because that's true no matter what, and I started working the address every way I knew. I checked the reverse lookup on the phone number. It came back as unlisted, no name, no service address. That happens sometimes with old landlines. I checked the map layer for structures and there was nothing out there but empty fields. I pulled the county parcel data. Nothing. And the whole time she stayed on the line, describing the fire, the way it was moving, the way the animals were screaming in the barn. Specific, detailed, not the vague fear of a prank. Prank callers get bored and start laughing. She never wavered. I did what you do. When a location won't verify, I picked the nearest confirmed point, County Road 9, and the turnaround, and I got ready to send a unit there, to at least look for smoke. Rural fire calls, you send somebody to find the glow. Fire's easy to spot at night. But before I could even create the incident myself, the CAD system created it for me. I want to be very precise about this, because it's the part I've gone over 1,000 times. On a normal call, I generate the incident. I type the location. I assign the call type. I hit enter, and the system spits out an incident number and starts the clock. That's the order. Caller, dispatcher, system. Always. That night, the incident number appeared, while I was still staring at the empty location field. A fresh number, correctly formatted, time-stamped to the second. And in the location field, which had been blank, which the system had refused to populate 10 seconds earlier, there was now an address, 41 County Road 9. And it was marked valid, green, verified. The map pin dropped itself out past the turnaround, out in the black empty field where there was nothing, and the system treated it like the most ordinary thing in the world. I sat there for a second. Then I did what I was trained to do. I dispatched. I keyed up the deputy who was on that night, a guy I'll call Reyes, working solo like everybody works out there. I gave him the call. Structure fire. Possible occupants. 41 County Road 9. I heard the little pause before he answered, because he knew that road too, but Reyes wasn't the type to argue with dispatch over the air. He just said he was en route. The woman was still on my line. I stayed with her. That's protocol on a fire with occupants. You keep them out of the structure, and you keep them talking. She told me she was standing in the yard. She told me she could hear the sirens coming, which she couldn't have, because Reyes was 20 minutes out and running silent to save the wildlife on the road. Then she said, "Thank you for sending Danny." I didn't say anything. "You always send Danny," she said. Reyes's first name was not Danny, but I'd worked with a Danny once, a deputy who'd been gone from the department for 3 years by then. He'd transferred to a bigger county down south. Nobody on that shift would have said his name. The call dropped before I could respond, just cut off. When I tried to call the number back, I got the 3 tones and the recording that says the number is not in service. Reyes reached the turnaround 8 minutes later. I remember his voice on the radio, and I remember it because Reyes never sounded rattled, and that night he did, just barely, just at the edges. He said, "Dispatch, I'm at the location. Be advised, I've got a structure here." I asked him to repeat. He said there was a farmhouse, white, set back off the road, down a driveway that, he said, wasn't here last week. No fire, no smoke, dark windows, and past the house, a silo. He didn't say the color. I asked him. There was a long pause on the radio, that flat hiss, And then he said, "It's hard to tell in the dark," and I let it go, because his voice told me not to push. I told him to hold at the road and not approach. He agreed a little too fast. He sat out there for maybe 15 minutes, and then he keyed up and said the house was gone. Not burned. Gone. The driveway too. Just field. He said it in the careful, deliberate voice of a man who has decided he is going to file a normal report and never speak of this again. I marked the incident. Here's where I made my first mistake. Though I didn't know the rules yet, I marked it as unfounded. False alarm. That's what you do when there's nothing there. It's the honest disposition. The system wouldn't accept it. It let me type the code, but when I hit enter, the disposition field reset itself to blank, and the incident stayed open. I tried again. Blank. A third time. Blank. So I left it open, and I went home at the end of my shift, and I told myself it was a bad night, with a bad caller, and a system due for a software update. That's a real thing that happens. Rural CAD systems are old and cranky. I'd seen them freeze, drop calls, mislocate cells by miles. A haunted farmhouse was a story. A buggy database was a fact. I chose the fact. I want you to understand, I wasn't being foolish. I was being a professional. The whole point of the job is that you don't leap to the impossible when the mundane is sitting right there. 99 times out of 100, the mundane is correct. It was the 100th time that got me. They came in slow at first. Over the next few weeks, one impossible call, then two, then a cluster. And they had a pattern. Once I started looking, which I did, because that's also the job. You look for patterns. Patterns are how you catch the guy making hoax calls. Patterns are how you find the domestic that's escalating before someone dies. The pattern was this. The locations never existed, but they were never random. They were always almost real. A road that had been renamed in the 90s. A bridge that used to cross the creek on the old highway before they built the bypass and tore the bridge down. A subdivision that got platted and approved but never built. Just a grid of empty lots and paper streets in the county records. Streets with names but no pavement. The impossible places were the ghosts of real decisions. Things that had been planned, or existed once, or were erased. The county's discarded drafts, and the callers knew things. Not all of them. Some were just frightened people reporting emergencies, and if you didn't check the address, you'd never know anything was wrong. A car accident, a break-in, a man not breathing. Ordinary calls from nowhere. But every so often, one of them would say something to me. Personal, small. A caller reporting a prowler who paused to ask if my knee was feeling better. And I had wrenched my knee 2 days earlier, stepping wrong off the curb outside the center, and I had told no one. A woman describing chest pains who called me by a nickname only my late father ever used. I stopped marking them unfounded, because it never worked anyway. I started just leaving them open, and passing them off at end of shift, with a note that said, "Unable to verify location." The day shift never asked. That should have told me something too. Around the 3rd or 4th week, I went looking in the archives. Every call gets logged. Every incident, going back decades, sits in the database. Audio, timestamps, dispositions, the whole record. It's public record for most of it, or at least accessible to us. I started searching the archive for those ghost addresses. The subdivision that was never built. The torn-down bridge. County Road 9, number 41. They were all in there. Not once. Dozens of times. Going back years. Calls from the never-built subdivision dating to before I was hired. Calls from the collapsed bridge going back to the year after it came down. Someone had been receiving these calls for a very long time, and someone had been logging them. I pulled the audio on a few. Most of the old ones had a dispatcher's voice on the recording, doing exactly what I'd been doing, verifying, staying calm, sending units. And I recognized some of the voices. Dispatchers I'd never worked with because they'd retired or quit or, in one case, died. There was a woman named Pruitt who'd had my shift before me, years back. I'd never met her. She left before I started, but there she was in the archive, on a call from the Paper Street subdivision, telling a caller in that same trained voice that help was on the way, and the caller telling her, clear as anything, "You're going to have my job someday, honey. You'll understand then." The caller said that to a dispatcher who was 2 dispatchers before me. I sat in that room at 4 in the morning, and I listened to a dead woman answer a call from a place that didn't exist, being told by a stranger about the person who would inherit her chair, and I understood that I was the person the stranger meant. Not Pruitt, me, 2 chairs down the line. That's when I stopped being able to file it under software. I brought it to a supervisor. I'll call her Marsh. She'd been running that comm center longer than anyone, close to 30 years. One of those people who seemed to have grown up out of the building itself. I caught her at shift change, when she came in early like she always did, and I told her I needed to show her something in the CAD system. She listened to me lay it out. The impossible addresses, the self-generating incident numbers, the archives. I kept it factual. I gave her incident numbers and timestamps because that's the language we both spoke, and I watched her face while I did it. She didn't look surprised. That's the thing I keep coming back to. A person hearing this for the first time looks confused, or worried about you, or amused. Marsh looked tired. She looked like someone hearing a diagnosis she'd been expecting for years. She let me finish. Then she pulled a chair over and sat down next to me, close, and she talked quietly, even though we were the only 2 people in the building. She didn't tell me what the calls were. I want to be clear about that, because I know that's the part you want. She never explained it. I don't think she could. I don't think anyone there ever knew what it actually was, and I've come to believe that not knowing was the whole point of how they handled it. You don't need to understand a thing to build a procedure around it. That's what a bureaucracy does. It doesn't explain. It manages. What she gave me were instructions, and they weren't written anywhere. They weren't in any manual, any SOP, any training. They were the kind of thing passed mouth to mouth from one night dispatcher to the next, the way Pruitt must have gotten them, the way whoever trained Pruitt must have gotten them. She told me, when a call comes from a location that won't verify, you handle it like a real call, because as far as the system is concerned, it is one, and fighting the system just keeps it open longer. Take the information, be calm, do the work. She told me, never transfer those calls to the state police. County stays county. She didn't say why. She said, state doesn't have the archive. It follows them. Don't hand it up the chain. I didn't understand that, and she didn't clarify. She told me, send 1 unit, never 2. If a deputy asks for backup on one of those, you find a reason to keep the 2nd unit where it is. 1 goes out, 1 comes back. 2 goes out, and she stopped there, and just shook her head, and said, just send 1. She told me, don't mark them false. Leave them open. They close on their own eventually. Some of them are still open from before I started here, she said. That's fine. Let them sit. And she told me the last one differently than the others. She lowered her voice even more, and she put it very plainly, like it was the only one that actually mattered. She said, sometimes the tone of the call changes. The caller's voice, the line, something. You'll know it when you hear it. It stops being about their emergency, and it starts being about you. When that happens, you end the call. You don't stay on the line to help. You don't try to keep them talking. You disconnect, and you log it, and you do not pick up if that number calls back on the same shift. Do you understand me? The ones that turn personal, you let go. I asked her the obvious question. I asked what happens if you don't. She stood up and pushed the chair back where it came from, and she said, you've got the archive. You already know some names in it that aren't in the archive anymore, because those people don't come to work now. And that was all she'd say. She went to start her day and left me sitting there with the sun coming up behind the blinds. I followed the rules. For a while. You'd be amazed how fast the impossible becomes routine when you have a procedure for it. That's the part nobody tells you about horror. It doesn't stay sharp. It dulls into a task. Ghost call from the dead subdivision. Take the info. Send one unit. Leave it open. Go get coffee. I stopped flinching. I even got a little proud of myself, the way you do about any part of the job you've mastered. I was the night dispatcher who knew how to handle the calls that don't exist. It felt like a skill. It felt, God help me, like being good at my job. The units learned it too, on their end, without ever saying it out loud. Reyes never once argued when I sent him solo to a road that shouldn't be there. He'd go. He'd sit at the nearest real point. He'd report something and then report it gone. And he'd come back. We never discussed it. That was its own kind of procedure, the not discussing. The whole department ran a second, silent set of rules underneath the real ones, and everybody followed them, and nobody admitted they existed. I did that for almost 2 years. Then one night the call was for me. It was a slow shift, like the first one. I've noticed they come on slow shifts, when the room is quiet and there's nothing else running. Like the quiet is what lets them through. The 911 line rang a little after 3. The screen populated, and I looked at the location field, which usually stayed empty on these until the system decided to fill it in, and this time it was already full. It was my address, my actual home address, the little rented house I drove to every morning after shift, correct down to the number. The caller information field had a name in it. My name. My full legal name. The one that's on my hire paperwork. Not the one anybody calls me. I almost didn't answer. Marsh's rule was about the calls that turn personal, and this one was personal before I even picked up. But I answered, because 2 years of training doesn't switch off, and because some part of me had to know. 911, I said, and my voice didn't sound like mine. It was quiet on the line. Then a voice, and the voice was mine. Not an impression, not close. Mine, my exact voice, saying the exact words I say 100 times a shift. 911, what's the location of your emergency? It was a recording. It was me, answering a call, but I hadn't recorded it. Or I had, on some shift I hadn't worked yet, because the timestamp that came up attached to the incident wasn't from that night. It was 3 weeks in the future. A shift I was scheduled for, but hadn't worked. I sat there and listened to myself answer an emergency I hadn't taken yet. And then, under the recording, behind it, a second voice. Liv. Also calm. It said my name, my real name, and it said, you need to send a unit. There's someone at your location who isn't breathing. The CAD system generated the incident. My address. Valid. Green. Medical emergency. Unresponsive party. And the map pin dropped on my house, and the little status field started blinking the way it does when a call needs a unit assigned, and I understood that the system was waiting for me to send a deputy to my own home to find a body. Marsh's rule was clear. The ones that turn personal, you let go. You disconnect. You don't stay on the line. But there's a rule underneath that rule. One she didn't say. One you only learn when it's your turn. When it's your address, your name, your body the system is describing, every instinct you've built over years of this work screams at you to send the unit. Because that's what you do. Someone's not breathing. You send help. That's the whole job. That's the belief the whole machine is built on. I hung up. I want you to know how hard that was. I hung up on a call reporting a death at my own house because a woman who'd retired by then had once told me to. I disconnected, and I logged it, and my hands were not steady, and the incident stayed open on my screen, with my name in the location field, blinking, waiting. The number called back within a minute, same number, which was my own home phone, calling the 911 center from a house I knew was empty, because I was sitting in the comm center 40 minutes away from it. I didn't pick up. Marsh's rule: don't answer if it calls back on the same shift. It rang out. It rang 11 times. I counted. Then it stopped. The incident closed itself a few minutes later. First one I ever saw close on its own, in real time. The disposition field filled in without me touching it, and it didn't say unfounded, and it didn't say false. It said, in the field where a deputy's report would go, refused. Just that, refused. I drove home that morning, the long way, the way that didn't pass any road that had ever generated one of those calls, and my house was fine, empty and quiet and fine. Nobody in it, nobody not breathing. I stood in my own living room in the daylight and felt like a man who had talked his way out of something he still didn't understand. I put in my notice 2 weeks later. I didn't give the real reason. You can't. I said the overnights were wearing on me, which was true enough, and Marsh accepted it without a word of argument, and I saw in her face that she knew exactly why, and that she'd seen it before, and that she wouldn't try to talk me into staying. She just said good, very quietly, like she was glad for me, like getting out was the win, and staying was the thing you didn't want for anybody. The shift I never worked, the one with the future timestamp, I wasn't there for it. I was already gone by then. I've thought about that a lot, whether that's what saved me, whether the call was for a version of me that would have been sitting in that chair 3 weeks later, and by leaving I stepped off the track before it arrived. I don't know. I don't get to know. That's the part of this that I've had to make peace with, that I will never get an explanation, because there was never an explanation to be had, only a procedure, and I followed it, and I'm still here. I don't work dispatch anymore. I do something else now, something with daylight and no radio and no addresses to verify. I don't miss it. I thought I would. I was good at it, but I don't. Here's the thing, though, the thing I actually came here to tell you, because the rest of it I could almost convince myself I imagined. Last month my phone rang at 3:12 in the morning. Old habit. I still wake up around then, my body still keeping night shift hours years later. The phone was face down on the nightstand, and it lit up the ceiling. I picked it up. There was no call, no missed call log, no number, nothing in the recents. But the screen was showing a notification I hadn't seen since I quit. The format of a cat alert, the exact layout of an incident notification from a system I no longer have any access to, that was decommissioned and replaced 2 years ago, that doesn't exist on any device I own. It had an incident number, correctly formatted. It had a timestamp, 3:12 a.m. It had a location field. The location was my current address, the one I moved to after I left, the one that isn't in any county record connected to that center, in a different county entirely, that I never told anyone at that job. And in the field where the caller name goes, it had my name, and in the field where the disposition goes, the one that says how a call was resolved, it wasn't blank, and it didn't say refused. It said, open. I've changed my number since. It didn't help. It came again last week, 3:12. Same notification on a phone, with a number the old system never had. I've started thinking about the thing Marsh wouldn't explain, about why you don't transfer those calls up the chain, about how she said the archive follows them. I think that's what an archive is, really. A thing that remembers you were there, a record that outlives the record keeper. I answered every call for 6 years. I verified every address. I sent the units. I trusted the system, because the system was the only thing in that dark room that never lied to me, that only ever knew what was real. That's what I can't get past, even now. It never lied. It only ever confirmed what existed. So I don't know what it means that it keeps confirming me. at a place I never told it about, on a night I'm not working, on a shift that ended years ago. I just know the incident is still open, and out there, in a system I can't reach and can't close, it's still waiting for someone to send a unit to my address. I'm not going to be here when they arrive,